Solution Advisor. I'm also a Microsoft MVP and MCT for business applications and a Flow and Power Apps community super user. You can connect with me on LinkedIn by scanning this QR code on the screen. Follow me on Twitter and connect with me on my blog again from the links on the screen. So please feel free to connect. I'll be happy to help you with any questions you have. And about today's session, we'll be discussing about the Dataverse connector in Power Automate. Excuse me if I keep saying CDS because that's on the mind right now. And we'll take a look at what are the different types of triggers which are already available, what are the different actions which are already available, and how we can use custom solutions and build on the top of that. So let's get started and let's build some flows. I hope you can see the Power App screen now. In the first demo, what I'll be doing is I'll be showing you how you can create a specialized webhook that can be triggered from a record change in Dataverse. And this is important when you're using NS2N relationships in Dataverse. Most of the times what happens is you can use the when a record is updated or when a record is created or when a record is deleted trigger, or the three of the ones which are available in the current environment connector to trigger a flow. But then most of the times, again, when you're using an NS2N relationship entity, you cannot use that because the trigger does not identify the table. And when you're creating an NS2N relationship between two tables, it creates a third table in the backend to store the data for those. And you can retrieve that using a webhook, which we'll be building now. So I'll take an example of the user's entity first and walk you through that. In your correct environment, when you log into Power Apps, you can go to tables and then start looking for the users table. And as you can see, I'm on the user table over here. And if I go to the relationships, there are a bunch of relationships created with the user table to other tables for tracking who actually worked on what. There are created by fields, there are modified by fields. But here we're looking for the teams relationship over here. So this relationship actually tracks which user is a part of what team, and then that is stored on the user record. So as you can see, I can see the relationship over here, which is the user to team, and it is a many-to-many relationship. The name of the relationship is team membership underscore association, and the table name is team membership. Now, if I wanted to create a flow so that it triggers when a person is added to a team or removed from a team, I cannot use the direct when a record is created, updated, or modified trigger because it will not identify this particular table. Because at the end of the day, the actions are happening on this table and the data is being reflected on the primary entities. So to do that, we'll start creating a webhook first, but then to create a webhook, we'll have to at least create a basic setup of our flow. So you can log on to flow.microsoft.com and start creating a new flow. I'll just select an instant cloud flow for now and search for the HTTP request trigger here. So I can select the when an HTTP request is received trigger and create this. I'll add a new step and let's just put a compose action for now and put it as test and save it. Now to actually see what is happening over here, I'll also create a model driven app and put the users table over there so we can see this in action. So I'll go to solutions, start creating a new solution. And in the test solution, I'm going to add existing. So the users table is an existing one. So I can select add existing table and search for users. Or rather not include the components, just add the table because we want to add it on the model driven app. And then I'm going to create a new model driven app over here. Okay, there you go. We're putting this on the model driven app so that when we are changing the team of a user, it will be easier for us to edit the record and trigger of the flow when we are testing. And while this is loading, I have my flow created over here. Let's rename this. And we'll keep the scope as whenever a user is added to a team, only then trigger this flow. And this may take a few seconds to load because we are doing on the classic one, and I'll come back here. Okay, I think it loaded. And let's name it as a test app. In the sitemap, I can edit over here. And in the sub area itself, I'm just going to edit this and select the user entity. Save this and publish. And when I play this, I'll be able to see the user entity popping up on my model-driven app. And let's play here. So depending on the views configured, depending on the form of the user, it is just going to put everything over here. We can restrict items when creating the model-driven app, but this is not the scope of this demo. We're just going to check a form, and let me open up myself here. And you can see that this is the, let's switch it back to a simple user form. There are different forms configured for different purposes, but we are just going to look at the user form. And here on the last box, while it is loading, you'll be able to see what all teams a user is a part of. So it shows over here that this team is available. And if I select add existing team, it is going to show me all the teams that are available that I can add this person to, or even remove them from. And then now that we have this, I'll come back here on my flow and we have saved this. Now it's time to trigger or register a webhook. So for that, what you can do is you can download the XRM toolbox. And once you've downloaded the XRM toolbox, install it properly. You can search for the plugin registration tool and launch the plugin registration tool. On the plugin registration tool, you can actually register a webhook to the Dataverse database. And to do that, we first have to create a new connection. So while creating this connection, I'm going to use Office 365 here and display a list of organizations so that whenever I log in, it is just directly showing me what all environments I can select. So let's try it like this. Because maybe my current user does not have the details and I'm going to sign into this. So I'll quickly check the correct email address and provide it over here. And once the connection is created, it is going to show me all the environments that are active and I have access to. So that is loading over here right now. It's taking its own sweet time. And anyways, while it is doing that, what we can do is we can quickly create a team. So I'll close this. I'll come back to solutions and come back to tables here and search for team. On the teams table, we have to create a new record. So I can select it and navigate to data, add a record. And once I have the record, start adding the team. So let's say sales team 1, and I'll select a business unit. So the business unit can be the same as the org over here. And for the administrator, I'll add somebody else. So let's say I'll add another user that I have created here and save and close. So this team has been created and I can see it on the data over here. When I log back to my users entity and I have opened my own record. So if I refresh here, I'll not be able to see it, but if I'm trying to add an existing team, I'll be able to see the sales team one. But before we do that, we first have to register the plugin. And for that, what we can do is I can start registering one from here. So I can select register a new assembly or register a new webhook depending upon the item that I'm creating. But right now, since we are doing a webhook, I'm going to select register a new webhook here. And I can provide a name of choice. So let's name the webhook as trigger and dash n. And the endpoint URL is going to come from our flow. So what we can do is go back to your flow, copy over the item URL from here, and let's open up Word. Paste the URL. Now what we have to do is we'll have to copy the URL separately and the query string parameter separately. So I'm going to copy this from here, the first part, and paste it. And then in the authentication, we are going to select HTTP query string and start adding values. So first one in the key is the API version. And we can get that from our URL that we just created over here. Copy it and paste it back. And then we'll add another property, which is going to be the SP, which is this one. SP property, we have triggers manual run until the SV part. The only thing here is all the mod2f that we have over here needs to be replaced by a slash. So I'll copy this part, paste here, and replace the mod2 with a slash, mod2f. And copy this part over here and paste it to the SP parameter. Then add another property, and we have the next one as sorry, someone has a question. Okay, we have SV, which is 1.0. So I'm going to create the SV property, and the version is 1.0. Add another property, which is SIG, the last one where we have this string. So I'll copy this and paste it over here. So now we have completed the configuration for our webhook registration. So I can save this. And I'll see that I'll have under my webhook, I should be able to see the registered webhook here. So hang on. All right. So this is a webhook registration here, and then I'm going to right click it and register a new step. In the new step, what we have to do is we'll have to configure on what condition that our flow is going to trigger. So whenever we are creating this record or whenever we are associating a user to a team, it is actually associating these two records and linking them together. So I'll name the message as associate and select this. And since we are doing it for an end-to-end, there's the primary entity and the secondary entity can be named as none. We cannot add any filtering attributes over here because it is restricted by this type of message we are selecting. And then I can provide a step name of my choice, select all these items, and we'll have the execution mode as asynchronous, and select the event pipeline as post operation. So keep it as default, right, the way it is right now, and register the new step. And once the step is registered, I can just do a reload organizations over here so that it refreshes everything and come back to my flow. So the registration part of the webhook is just this much. I can save my flow now and test it. So what we'll do is we'll just hit this test button and hit manually. Come back to the users table, and here I'm going to add this user to the team. So now the user has been added to a team, and if I come back to my flow over here, I should see the run as successful. All right. And now that it is successful, I'll see that there's a certain set of items which have been retrieved in the body. And right now, this setup is going to work for every table that is there on Dataverse. So on any table, if there's an NS to N relationship entity or an NS to N relationship existing, if you're associating the record, then it is going to trigger at any cost. So what we want to do is we want to filter this out to only trigger when the team membership is updated. And to do that, what we'll do is we'll start adding some trigger conditions first. And as you can see here in the body, we first have the input parameters over here, which have the system user, so the person who has been added to the team, and then the team membership association, the relationship to which the user has been added. And here are the related entities, that is the team entity where we have added this user to. So what we want to do is we want to get the team membership association schema name. And based on this, we can filter our trigger so that it only triggers when the schema name is returned with the team membership association. So I'll duplicate this tab here. And then open the flow in edit mode. So go back to my flows. In the edit mode, I can expand this action and then go to settings. In the settings, you'll add a trigger condition. So in the trigger condition, we'll start building it. It should be at the rate and equals because we are going to check if it is equal. And I'll just place the comma first and type, I'll just copy paste the team membership association from here. Now we want to point it to the value that it needs to extract from this point here. So it is going to be the body. In the body, there are input parameters. So body is a JSON type, and then the input parameters are of array type. And then in the array, we are going to get the first item because the 0 is just the data where about the user entity. And then we are going to get the schema name. So we'll start building the expression for that. It is going to be trigger body. Brackets and a question mark. I think B is going to be a small one for trigger body. And after that, we had the input parameters, square brackets and double quotes. Let's just check if we have the correct case, because if it is not correct, then it is not going to trigger input parameters. And then in the input parameters, we want to get the first item. So I'm going to use array indexing, which is 1. After which there is another item, and that is like input parameters. And then there's value, which is another object. So I'm going to place value here. Then another question mark to get the schema name. So I'll just copy over the schema name from here and paste it back. So now that we have this expression ready, I can just save this flow. And this is just going to trigger only when there is a team membership association key in the schema name. Now that we have this, we need to notify the users when they are added to a team. So what I can do is I'll add another step over here and search for get a row. Okay. So it's already selecting the current environment. So I'm just going to use the table name. So first I want to get the user details who has been added to the team. And I can select the user table from here. In the item ID, again, we are going to write an expression. So we have to track back here to get the body and then the input parameters, the first one, and from there, the value and then the ID. So let's quickly build that expression here. Now this will also give me a IntelliSense, so I can use trigger body and then input parameters. All right, input parameters is an array, so we don't need a question mark here. We'll just do a 0 because the first item is the user entity. And from there, we are getting the value. And from the value, we need to get the ID. So I just missed a single quote over here. Note that this is very important while you're building your expressions. And the ID is capital IND. So I'll just paste that, copy over the entire thing and click OK, because sometimes your expressions don't save automatically over here. Now that we have this, I'll also get the row where to get the details of the team to which the person is added. So I'm going to search for get a row again. And this time the table name is going to be teams or team. Yeah, it's teams here. And then in the item ID, we'll again build the expression. So I'm going to copy, I'm just going to paste the expression from first one and then we'll modify this. But then the thing to note over here is, as it is an end-to-end relationship, a user can be added to multiple teams or multiple teams can be associated to multiple users. And now that we are just adding the user to a team, we can add one specific user to multiple teams at once, which is why our second item over here returns an array again. So if I come here and I'll see the entity as teams, you can see in the value, I have the value as an array. And in the array, I'm going to get the ID. So at the first one, the value was just an object. So what I'll do is I'll just add another bracket over here to get the first item or the first team the person has been added to, and change this to 2 because this is the second item from the input parameters array where the value is team and then we are accessing the ID to which team the person has been added to. And then once we have this, we can get rid of the compose action. We don't need this anymore. I'm going to add another email notification action over here. And create the connection and send an email to the user saying that they've been added to a team. So in the 2 items, I can search for primary email, which is the output of the get a row action for a user. And then I can select the subject as added to a new team. And in the body, I can just use the dynamic content again. So I can search full name of the user. And I can search the name of the team. And that's it. Let's save this and try to run this now. So first what I'm going to do is we can either run it from a previous run or we can just remove this team from here. And come back to our flow and test it from scratch. So come back here, refresh this, and then associate the user to the team again. Now that it has been added, we'll see that the flow should trigger now, and it has run successfully. So it has first checked that, okay, the user has been added to a team, get the user record, get the team record, and send an email notification. So if I open up the email box now, I should see an email notification stating that I have been added to the sales team one. And one of the reasons why this is very important is most of the times when you're building complex solutions using Dataverse as a database, most of the times security permissions on most entities or most records are configured via teams, and a user and team integration is extremely important in such situations. So this flow is really helpful when a user is being added to a team. And similarly, you can build it for when a user is removed from a team also. You just have to create another step over here. So I'll come back to my webhook and I can register another step. So register a new step, and this time you're going to select dissociate instead of the associate, and rest everything works the same way. So once you have this configured over here, you'll have to configure your trigger similar in a similar way so that it triggers only when a specific relationship is being in use, or only when the user or basically the entity that you want it to trigger on is triggering the flow, or else it is just going to trigger on every NS2N relationship whenever there is an update or whenever there is an association or a dissociation. So this was our first demo about how we can build custom solutions on top of the Dataverse connector, because this is currently not supported directly. Whenever you try to add the relationship table name to the trigger itself, or when a record is created, updated, or deleted, or on the native common data service actions or triggers, it is going to return you an error stating that such table doesn't exist and it is not found on the database, because those entities, those tables are created as a on the backend and it is not accessible to you. So this was the first one. And the second important demo that I wanted to do here is about how we can get audit history or the record change history for audited entities in using Power Automate. So right now what happens is, let's say if you have a claim solution on your environment and there are claim agents who are assigned to a specific claim, and whenever that changes, a notification needs to be sent out. But what you can do in the current out-of-the-box capability with Power Automate is trigger a flow whenever the user or whenever the user agent is changed on the claim request, and then send them an email stating that, okay, you have been assigned a new claim, and that's the end of it. But you cannot get the details of who the claim was assigned to at an earlier point, before this person was assigned this claim, who was actually dealing with this client. So to get that information, we can enable auditing on entities, but then you cannot directly get the audit data in Power Automate. To get that, we'll again build another custom solution over here. But before we do that, what we have to do is, I'll get back to my flows and close the run history here. In the tables, first I'll create a table, a quick one. Let's name it as claims, or instead of doing it over here, we'll do it on our solution itself so that it is easier for us to manage it later on. Here I'm going to add a new table. And it's taking time again, so all right. And let's name it as claims again. And in the more settings, we will ensure that the table type is of a user or team so that this record can be assigned to a specific person. And once we have this, I'll just directly create. We'll not do much changes over here or create any more attributes because we already have the name field. So we'll just assign a name, and then we'll change the owner to see how flow works. So I'll come to data over here. I'll add a new record. And it's okay. All right, it says no permission. So we may have to add it to the model driven app itself. So it will take another minute. Let's quickly change that. So here I can add another area into this group. So let's just select the group first and add another sub area here. For this sub area, we'll select the entity, that is claims, and save. Now let's close this, and probably the another reason why it did not allow was I did not publish the customizations. So I'll publish the customizations now and come back to our app here, and let's refresh. Okay, so I see the entity here. I can go to the claims table, add a new claim, and let's name it as test claim 1 and save this. So now we have a claim entity or a claim record created over here on this entity, but now we want to audit this so that we track which user or which internal agent was working on which claim. And for that, what we can do is first we'll have to check if auditing has been enabled, and that you can do by going to the advanced settings. This is the classic portal that we're going to see, so it may take a little bit time to load. While that is happening, at least we can start building the initial part of our flow. So I'll select a new flow from here, and let's first select an instant flow, and we can configure the trigger. What we'll do is let's skip this and search for common data service again. And let's select the when a record is created, updated, or deleted, and the condition can be created, or sorry, updated, because we are going to track the updates. And the table name is claims. Let's keep the scope as organization. And on a new step, I'm just going to add a compose action for now. And save this flow. Let's say get audit history and save it. So now that this is loaded, I can go to settings and search or select auditing. And in the global audit settings, we'll have to ensure that it is enabled for common entities or common tables. I'll also open another version of that so that it doesn't take forever. Because once we enable that, we also have to check that the auditing is enabled on the field level. Usually when a table is of ownership type where you have defined the ownership as a user or a team, the auditing is enabled. So I'll select start auditing and audit user access, and also for common entities so that we are able to track the custom entities that we are building, and click OK. And while that is happening, oh my God, this is too slow today. Okay, that's saved. So what I can do is I can come back to customizations here and select customize the system. When you're doing this, you can actually see the list of all the tables which are present in the specific environment. So this is the classic or the deprecated way of doing this. Now we are always working on the modern UI for creating the tables and modifying the attributes and everything. Before the modern UI was released, this was the portal that we used to use. And it's just taking forever to load. All right. So I can expand the entities over here and look for the claims. There you go. Okay, it's still loading over here. I'm just thinking that it's done already. So we'll give this another minute and see. I'll just show you the setting because usually, as I told earlier, it is automatically enabled for the owner field, the auditing, but you can also enable it for other fields. Okay, let's let this load. We'll come back here. We can just check it if it's working fine or not. So I'll open this claim request over here. And since it's me right now over here, I'll remove my user and I'll assign another user to this. Probably refresh it again because it's just too much. So I'll come back here, open the app again. What? Okay. So points to note, every time do hard refreshes because it can cache the previous page. And I'll open the test claim again, remove my account and assign this to another user and save this. So this is saved and I'll come back, or I'll rather open the auditing again from here. So advanced settings again. And if I'll see my flow, I suppose that should have triggered as well because we changed the owner. And we'll see that this particular trigger does not return with the information on what the previous value was. But since we've enabled auditing, I'll come here and I can see the audit log management. And it should appear over here provided the auditing was enabled. Okay, so what I'm going to do is open this up again. And go back to settings. Let's quickly see if the customizations can open now since it's loading a little faster. Okay, finally, and we can see over here. All right, so auditing is not enabled yet, and it is not allowing us to enable as well. That's interesting. Okay, here. So I've enabled auditing over here, and you'll have to enable it on the entity level as well. And it says that by default, all the fields for this entity are enabled for auditing, and we can also choose specific fields. So if we want to disable it, and now that I have done this, I'll save it over here. My God. Just give me 1 second here. Let me quickly check what's happening. Because this is a new environment, probably some solutions are getting imported. And let's parallelly also check if we can do it directly from the modern experience. Probably we should be able to do it, but okay. Nope, doesn't show over here. Let's go back and try again. Probably this time it should work. Nope. So this is not happening here, and without this, it's a showstopper. Okay, let's do one thing. So I'll just walk you over the process of how we would do it, and if possible, by in a couple of minutes, the solution should get deployed. And basically, once I have the flow created over here, I'm going to add. I need to add a HTTP action from which I'm going to call the API to get the audit record history. But we can do that only by impersonating as a user, for which we'll have to create a registration in Azure. So I'm going to log into portal.azure.com. And we'll create an application registration and provide access to the Dynamics API. So let's close this. Let's go to the app registrations. And in the app registration, I can create a new one. Let's name it as app user for audit. And I can select a specific role. So let's keep it like this and register. And in the app registration, what I can do is view API permissions. Over here, what we're going to do is add a permission, and let's select Dynamics CRM and user impersonation. add this. Once we have this here, let's grant admin consent because it is required. And once we provide the admin consent, what we can do is get back to the overview. And from the overview, you can see the application ID, the object ID, and this information will be important when we are creating the post request. So let's quickly check again if we are able to enable the auditing. Nope. Anyways, so basically once you create the application registration over here, in the settings again, you'll have to look for secure administration security and create a new application user first. So we can create a user from here. And this is just going to take forever to load. So let's give it another minute and we'll see the entire menu of the nav icons. As you can see here. So I'll first change this to view the application users only and start creating a new one. Okay. Should take a minute to again load the nav here. Let's refresh it. Okay, let's do it from here. Probably we should be able to do it. Nope.
Hi, Arjun.
Hey, Raj. Yep.
Hello, Yash, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, Yash. So this is a really, really great hands-on session. Unfortunately, obviously, as we know, on the Saturdays, Microsoft runs updates on the servers, and so that can sometimes cause, a lot of this bottleneck. So, I think what we should do is if you can just do a overview of what you've covered today in terms of your approach to this solution. I think that's what's really going to help the attendees. I think you've already showed them how to build it. I think if you just kind of run through the concepts, I think that would help them digest exactly what it is you've done today. I think.
Yes, sure, Raz, we can do that. So basically, the session was focused to show how we can enhance the current capability of the CDS or the Dataverse connector and build more on top of it, and customize based upon the asks or based upon any critical requests that you have. So the first one was for triggering a flow when a record is associated to an N-to-N relationship entity. And that's a very sleek flow that we have over here where you can integrate it as a webhook on the Dataverse database. And every time there's an action being performed over there, it is going to trigger our flow. And you can then trigger, or you can set up the flow in a way where you can notify users. You can also welcome them to Teams. You can do a lot of other things. and then it is applicable for all NH2N relationships that you create on Dataverse. So in the one that we did, we just saw how we can use expression filtering and make the flow trigger on a specific condition only. So you can further enhance that by adding more relationship names if you wanted to use the same flow for a couple of other tables. So you could do that as well. The second one was focused on how we can retrieve the audit details for a table where you want to track specific fields or track the entire table itself and see what all columns are being changed on that. So if I took an example of the claims entity to show if there was a service agent that changed on the claim request, then we can notify them or we can gather that information. But it could be or other use cases also. So for example, if you raised a claim request for a specific amount, but then that amount has been changed by someone. So you want to track who changed that or what happened and why did that happen. So for that, what I was trying to do is you enable the auditing on your entity after you create it. So make sure that you're doing it well in advance and after the solution is deployed properly. After that, a user who has access to the Dynamics or to the Dataverse database cannot directly get it using the HTTP action for which we created the app registration over here. And once the app registration is created, you can create a secret. You can create a secret from the app registration. And once you have that secret, you can, in your flow, add a new step, which is post an HTTP request. So I can just search for HTTP and select this action. You can select the method as get because we are going to retrieve the data. So once you put this get request over here, you'll have to enter a URI. And what you can do is these are custom actions which are already available on the Dynamics that can be used for Dataverse. Basically, it's just a layer on the top of it. So you can Google of all the inbound and actions which are available that can be performed on the API, and you can construct the URI based on that. Then once you have this, you can show advanced options over here and select the authentication as Active Directory OAuth. And here you can put the tenant ID from your application registration, and you can put all the credentials. The audience would be Dynamics and the URL of the org, which is this part. So I have this until here, the org xyz.crm.dynamics.com. And then you can set the client ID, which is going to be coming from your app registration again. And the credential type is secret. So we'll put it as secret only. And the other part is after you do that, you can use again filter expressions. So once you have this completed, you can use a compose action to pull all the payload. So every time you'll see that whenever the user is changed or whenever a specific field item, that is the amount or whatever has changed, you can get those details over here in Flow and you can build on top of it. If you wanted to store that information somewhere, you can store that. If you want to report to a director or if you want to report to a team manager, we can do that. If there's an approval required, we can do that. And if the approval was rejected, we can change it back to the previous values. So the scope is endless over there and you can keep building on top of it. And that was the main two demos that I wanted to show over here, how we can achieve more on the common data service or the Dataverse using Power Automate and these custom actions. And it is loading really slow even now. So I would have shown you how to create this application user over here. You just put the application ID and then save this person. So this is created as an application user on the on this particular environment. And then on this environment, you can use the Dynamics API to perform all these actions. So if I were to do the audit, so I can just search for retrieve audit history. And just enter. So you'll see that there is a specific function that can be called for it. And I also have a blog post on this that you can follow step by step. So this you can see over here. As you can see, the delete record change history. So this is a specific function, delete audit sheet date request. This is also a function. There are a list of functions that can be used and you can use that along with the API. And here is the URL that you would use for how to get this one. And I can show a small demo here, which I already have on my blog. So you'll see that if I change the claim request, This is a fully functional claims application that I worked on earlier. And if you change the request or assign it to someone else and save this record, it is going to trigger your flow and keep all the information and notify the person that, okay, this claim request was assigned to you. Now it is being assigned to this person. So that's pretty much it from my side, Ras. And thank you so much for providing me with this opportunity. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Yash. Yes, so there's just a lot of thanks from everyone and link to your blog, which are provided by thedevs.com.
Yes.
So that's how you can follow that tutorial. And I have to say, Yash, this use case is going to be a very common pattern that's going to be used, because I can see it being used on nearly every project.
Yes, totally. I mean, most of the implementations, wherever you're using Dataverse, you'll run into the NS2N relationships, and auditing is one very important feature that can be used, and it can be leveraged. So.
David is asking, where is the application user password stored?
So the application user password is not generated per se, because the application registration is created in Azure. The secret is used on the HTTP action when we are trying to authenticate the user with the Active Directory OAuth. So how the token is used is basically you put all the information, the client ID, the secret, and the tenant ID over there. And we use the login URL as login.microsoft.com. And your audience is going to be your Dynamics database URL, whatever is the front part, org.crm.dynamics.com. And then it will automatically generate the token with that and perform the request.
Well, there you have it. That was Yash. So thank you, Yash. Really good practical session that I can really say you can definitely use this on nearly every project. So highly valuable session. So I just want to thank you again for that. You're very humble. This session was very, very practical, hands-on, and they're always hard to do. So thank you again for such a great session, and it's going to help a lot of people on a lot of projects.
Thank you so much, Raz. Thank you, everybody.